My true story from Ohio. He said, "You're just extra weight." So I took my house back. My name is Dorothy Mae Henderson, and I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Akron, Ohio my whole life, watched this city change from bustling steel mills to empty lots, seen neighbors come and go like seasons. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what my own son would put me through. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes that blood runs cold as winter on Lake Erie. It started innocently enough, like most heartbreaks do. My Michael, my only child, had fallen on hard times. The factory where he'd worked for 15 years shut down overnight, leaving him with a mortgage he couldn't pay and 2 kids to feed. His wife, Sarah, had left him 6 months earlier, taking half of everything and leaving him with the boys, Tommy, 12, and little Jake, just 8. When he called me that rainy October evening, his voice cracking like it did when he was small, my heart broke for him. "Mom, I don't know what to do. The bank's threatening foreclosure. I've got nowhere to go with the boys." I looked around my 3-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same house where Michael had grown up, where I'd raised him after his father died when he was 10. The same house I'd worked double shifts at the hospital to keep, sacrificing my own dreams to give him stability. "Come home, sweetheart," I said without hesitation. "Bring the boys. We'll figure it out together." That was my first mistake, thinking we were still a team. Michael moved in with Tommy and Jake the following week. I watched those 2 precious grandsons drag their belongings up the same stairs their father had climbed as a boy. Tommy was quiet, angry about the divorce and the move. Jake still believed everything would work out, the way 8-year-olds do. "Grandma Dorothy, is this really where Dad grew up?" Jake asked, touching the pencil marks on the kitchen door frame where I'd measured Michael's height year after year. "Sure is, honey. See that mark there? That's when your daddy was exactly your age." Jake's eyes lit up, and for a moment it felt like we were building something beautiful, a refuge for this broken little family. At first, Michael seemed grateful. He helped with groceries, played with the boys in the backyard, even fixed the squeaky hinge on the screen door I'd been meaning to repair for months. We fell into a routine. I'd make breakfast before heading to my part-time job at the church office. He'd look for work while the boys were at school, and evenings we'd all sit around the dinner table like a real family. "Mom, I can't thank you enough for this," he said one evening, helping me clear dishes. "I promise I'll find work soon, get back on my feet." "You're my son," I replied, squeezing his shoulder. "This is what family does." The first sign of trouble came 3 months later. Michael had found a job, nothing fancy, just warehouse work, but it was steady income. Instead of looking for his own place, he started talking about improvements to my house. "Mom, this place needs updating. The kitchen's from the 70s, the carpet's ancient. If we're all going to live here, we should make it nice." I should have heard the word "we" as a warning bell. "Honey, I've lived here 42 years. It's perfect the way it is." "But Mom, think about the boys. They need a proper game room, and that second bathroom upstairs is tiny. We could expand." "With what money, Michael? And who's we?" He got that look then, the same stubborn expression he'd worn as a teenager when he wanted something I couldn't afford. "I'm working now. I can contribute. But if I'm paying to live here, I should have a say in how the place looks." That's when the ground started shifting beneath my feet. Over the next few months, Michael's contributions came with strings attached. He paid for a new refrigerator, but suddenly my old dishes weren't good enough for the updated kitchen. He bought a big screen TV for the living room, then complained that my furniture made the room look cheap. "Mom, you've got to understand, I'm building a life here. The boys need to feel like this is their home too." "It is their home. It's all of our home. But it doesn't feel that way when everything looks like it's from a garage sale." Each criticism felt like a paper cut, small but stinging. My floral couch, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy, became that old lady furniture. My collection of ceramic angels, gifts from friends over the years, were dust collectors that make the place look cluttered. Slowly, quietly, I watched my home transform into something I didn't recognize. The worst part was how Michael started treating me in front of the boys, where once he'd asked my opinion, now he'd override my decisions. "Grandma says we can't have soda with dinner," Jake mentioned one evening. Grandma worries too much, Michael replied, opening 3 cans of Coke. A little soda won't hurt you boys. It wasn't about the soda. It was about respect, about my role in my own home becoming smaller and smaller. By spring, I felt like a guest in the house I'd lived in for 4 decades. Michael had installed a new sound system that played music I didn't like. He'd thrown out my old curtains and replaced them with blinds that made every room feel cold and sterile. When I protested, he'd sigh like I was being unreasonable. Mom, you've got to move with the times. This isn't 1985. This is my house, Michael. Technically, yes, but we all live here now. It should reflect all of us. The breaking point came on a Thursday in June. I was in the kitchen making my famous meatloaf, the same recipe I'd used when Michael was growing up, the same one he used to beg me to make for his birthday. Tommy and Jake were at the counter, helping me mix ingredients, flour dusting their little hands. Now the secret is to add the breadcrumbs slowly, I was telling them, when Michael walked in, still wearing his work clothes, looking tired and irritated. "What's all this mess?" he asked, eyeing the flour on the counter, the mixing bowls in the sink. "I'm teaching the boys how to make meatloaf. It's the same recipe I taught you when—" "Mom, we've talked about this. I don't want them eating all that heavy food. And look at this kitchen. It's a disaster." "It's not a disaster. It's cooking. Remember how you used to love helping me? That was different." He started shoving things into the dishwasher with sharp, angry movements. "I work 10 hours a day, and I come home to chaos. Can't you just keep things simple?" The boys looked between us, sensing the tension. Jake's bottom lip started to quiver. "I was just teaching them." "Teaching them what? To make a mess? To waste time with old recipes nobody wants anymore?" Michael's voice was rising, and I could see neighbors' faces appearing in windows across the street. "Michael, please, the boys need structure, not some grandmother filling their heads with outdated ideas about how things should be done." That word, grandmother, hit me like a slap. Not Mom, not even Dorothy. Grandmother. Like I was some old woman who'd wandered in off the street. I looked at Tommy and Jake, saw confusion and hurt in their eyes, and something inside me cracked. "Boys, go wash up for dinner," I said quietly. They scattered upstairs, and Michael and I stood facing each other across the kitchen where I'd bandaged his scraped knees, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd held him when he cried after his father's funeral. "What's happened to you?" I whispered. "What's happened to me? Mom, I'm trying to build a life here. I'm working, I'm contributing, I'm making this place better. But you act like every change is some kind of personal attack. Because this is my home, Michael. I've lived here longer than you've been alive. I've earned the right to what? To keep everything exactly the same forever? To make me and my boys live in some museum to your past? Your boys? They're my grandsons. This is their heritage, their family history. Their family history is what I make it now. I'm their father. I make the decisions." We stared at each other across a gulf that seemed to widen with every breath. "I never asked you to change everything," I said finally. "I just asked you to respect that this is my home." Michael's face softened for a moment, and I thought maybe we could find our way back to each other. Then his expression hardened again. "Mom, you need to understand something. I appreciate what you did for us, I really do. But I'm not 12 years old anymore. I don't need you making rules about what my kids can eat or how my house should look." "Your house?" The words hung between us like smoke. "Our house," he corrected quickly. But we both heard what he'd said. That night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of my home, sounds that no longer felt like mine. Michael watching his programs on his television, the boys playing video games on his new system, the hum of his refrigerator, the tick of his clock on the mantel where my family photos used to sit. When had I become a stranger in my own life? The final blow came 3 weeks later, on a sweltering Saturday in July. I was tired, more tired than usual, and I'd spent the morning sitting on the front porch with my coffee, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes up and down Maple Street. It reminded me of Michael at that age, fearless and laughing, calling, "Look, Mom," every time he learned a new trick. Michael came out and sat beside me, and for a moment I thought maybe we could talk, really talk, the way we used to. "Mom, we need to discuss something." I set down my coffee cup, suddenly alert. Sarah wants to reconcile. My heart sank. Not because I didn't want Michael to be happy. I did, desperately. But because I knew what was coming. She's been calling, saying she made a mistake. She wants to try again for the boys' sake. That's wonderful, honey. If you think it's right. The thing is, she doesn't feel comfortable living here. With you. There it was. She says it would be too weird, too crowded. She wants us to get our own place again. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. I understand. But here's the thing, Mom. With the housing market the way it is, and trying to start over, we can't afford much. Sarah's been looking at places, and there's this rental house across town that would be perfect for us. But the deposit and first month's rent? My stomach clenched. I was hoping maybe you could help us out. One last time, just until we get on our feet. How much? 4,000, maybe 5, with moving expenses. I looked at my hands, weathered and spotted with age, hands that had worked so many extra shifts to keep this house, to give Michael everything he needed. I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, Michael. But the house, you could take out a home equity loan. This place is worth way more than you paid for it. It would be an investment in our future, in the boys' future. An investment in their future, not our future. Let me think about it, I said. Mom, we need to move fast. Sarah's already put in an application. If we don't act now, we'll lose it. Always the urgency. Always the pressure. That evening, as I made dinner, I could hear Michael on the phone with Sarah, their voices low and excited as they planned their new beginning. The boys sat at the kitchen table doing homework, oblivious to the adult drama swirling around them. Grandma Dorothy, are we moving again? Jake asked, looking up from his math worksheet. What makes you ask that, sweetheart? Dad's been talking about a new house. I like it here, though. I like my room, and I like how you make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Tommy looked up from his reading. At 12, he understood more than his brother. Mom's coming back, he said quietly. Dad told us. How do you feel about that? I asked. Tommy shrugged. I guess it's good. But what about you, Grandma? Are you coming with us? The question hung in the air like morning mist. I looked at these two boys who'd become such a bright spot in my life, and I realized Michael hadn't even discussed that possibility with them. We'll see, honey. We'll see. But I already knew the answer. The conversation happened 3 days later. Michael came home from work with papers in his hand, loan documents he'd already had prepared. Always thinking ahead, my son. Mom, I've got everything ready. All you need to do is sign here, and we can have the money within a week. I looked at the papers, at the number that would put my house, my security, at risk. Michael, what if something happens? What if you can't pay it back? Nothing's going to happen. Sarah has a good job now, and I'm making decent money. We'll pay you back within 2 years, guaranteed. But if you don't, Mom, why are you being so negative? I'm trying to rebuild my family here. I'm trying to give your grandsons a stable home with both parents. Isn't that what you want? It was what I wanted. But something felt wrong, something I couldn't quite name. I just need to understand, if I help you with this, where does that leave me? Michael's face changed then, became impatient in a way that reminded me too much of his father during their worst fights. What do you mean? Where does that leave you? You'll be right here, in your house, just like always. Except you won't be here anymore. The boys won't be here. Mom, you can't expect us to live with you forever. I'm 35 years old. I need my own life. I'm not asking you to live with me forever. I'm asking you to consider that I'm 73 years old, and if I risk my house to help you start over, what happens to me if things go wrong? Things won't go wrong. But what if they do? Michael stood up, running his hands through his hair the way he had as a teenager when he was frustrated. Mom, I can't live my life based on what-ifs. I have to take chances. I have to build something for my family. I am your family. The words came out smaller than I intended, but they carried all the weight of 43 years of motherhood. Michael turned to look at me, and for a moment, his expression softened. Then he sighed, a long, tired sound. Mom, you know I love you, but you can't be the center of my world anymore. I have a wife, or I will again, and I have children. They have to come first now. I'm not asking to be the center. I'm just asking to be considered. You are being considered. That's why I'm asking for your help instead of going to a bank. That's why I'm talking to you about this instead of just leaving. Instead of just leaving. Like my help was the only thing keeping him here. What if I say no? The question seemed to surprise him. Why would you say no? I'm not saying I will. I'm asking what happens if I do. Michael sat back down, his voice taking on that patient tone people use with children and elderly relatives. Mom, if you say no, then Sarah and I will have to find another way. It'll be harder, it'll take longer, but we'll figure it out. But I want you to think about what that means. What does it mean? It means I'll remember that when I needed help, really needed help, to put my family back together, you said no. It means the boys will remember that Grandma chose money over their happiness. The manipulation was so subtle, so wrapped in logic that it took my breath away. That's not fair, Michael. Fair? Mom, nothing about the last year has been fair. Fair would have been Sarah not leaving in the first place. Fair would have been me not losing my job. Fair would have been a lot of things. But this is where we are, and I'm asking my mother to help me build something better for her grandsons. I looked at the papers again, at the signature line that would put everything I'd worked for at risk. I need time to think. Time to think about what? This is your son asking for help. This is your grandson's future we're talking about. Michael, please. Mom, I don't understand why this is so complicated. You've always said family comes first. Well, this is family. This is your family asking for help. But something in his voice, something in the way he kept saying, your grandsons, instead of just the boys, made me realize this wasn't about family at all. This was about what I could provide. That night, I called my sister Linda in Toledo. Linda was 5 years older than me, and she'd always been the practical one. Dorothy, honey, tell me you're not seriously considering this. He's my son, Linda, and those boys will be fine no matter what. But if you risk your house and Michael defaults, where will you be? You'll be 73 years old with no home and no savings. He wouldn't let that happen. Wouldn't he? Dorothy, think about the last year. Has he treated you like someone he wouldn't want to see homeless? The question hit me like a physical blow because I knew the answer. He's just under stress. Stop making excuses for him. You raised him better than this. But somewhere along the way, he forgot that respect and gratitude aren't optional just because you're family. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Michael had eaten thousands of meals, where I'd kissed his scraped knees better, where I'd held him when he was scared or sad, the kitchen that no longer felt like mine. I made my decision that night, sitting at the table where my family had shared so many memories. But it wasn't the decision Michael expected. The next morning, I waited until the boys left for school and Michael came downstairs for coffee. I've made up my mind about the loan, I said. His face lit up. Mom, I knew you'd come through. You're amazing, you know that? I'm not doing it. The smile died on his face. What? I'm not taking out a loan on my house to fund your fresh start with Sarah. But why? I don't understand. This is for your grandsons. No, Michael. This is for you and Sarah. The boys will be fine either way, but this is about what you want. That's not true. They need stability. They had stability here. They had a grandmother who loved them, a home full of family history, traditions that connected them to something bigger than themselves. You're the one who decided that wasn't enough. Michael's face darkened. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us when we need you most? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm choosing not to risk the roof over my head for a relationship that's already failed once. That's incredibly selfish, Mom. The word hit me like a slap, but I'd been expecting it. Selfish? Michael, I gave you a home when you had nowhere to go. I fed your children. I loved them. I made them part of my daily life. I rearranged my entire existence to accommodate your needs. And now, because I won't risk my security for your want, I'm selfish? This isn't about want. This is about need. I need to rebuild my family. Then rebuild it. But do it with your own resources, your own risks, your own sacrifices. The way I did when I was raising you. We stood facing each other across the kitchen. And I could see the exact moment when Michael stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. "Fine," he said coldly. "If that's how you want it, that's how it'll be. But don't expect us to stay here any longer than necessary. I never expected you to stay at all. I thought you were my son coming home. I didn't realize you were a tenant who just happened to share my DNA." That afternoon, while I was at work, Michael called a moving company. I came home to find boxes scattered throughout my house and my grandsons looking confused and sad. "Grandma Dorothy, Dad says we're moving this weekend," Jake said, his voice small and uncertain. I knelt down to his level, my heart breaking. "I know, sweetheart." "Are you coming with us?" I looked over at Tommy, who was old enough to understand more, and saw the hurt in his eyes. "No, honey. This is Grandma's house. This is where I belong." "But we belong with you, too," Jake said, and the simplicity of his truth nearly undid me. "You'll always belong with me, Jake. No matter where you live, you'll always be my grandsons, and I'll always be your grandmother. That doesn't change." Tommy came over and hugged me then, this almost teenager who was trying so hard to be strong. "It's not fair," he whispered against my shoulder. "No, sweetheart, it's not. But sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes we have to make the best of situations we didn't choose." "Will we still see you?" I looked over at Michael, who was aggressively packing dishes, his jaw set in that stubborn line I knew so well. "I hope so, Tommy. I really hope so." But even as I said it, I knew Michael would make it difficult. When people feel guilty about their choices, they often punish the people who remind them of that guilt. The moving truck came on Saturday morning. I watched my son pack up his life, the life I'd helped him rebuild, and load it into a truck that would take him away from me forever. Because that's what this was, really. Forever. Michael barely spoke to me during the move, directing the movers with clipped, professional efficiency. When they loaded the boys' beds, Jake started crying. "I don't want to leave Grandma Dorothy," he sobbed. Michael picked him up, his voice gentle in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "I know, buddy, but we're going to have our own house now. Mom's going to be there, and we'll have our own rooms, and it'll be great. But what about Grandma? Grandma will be fine. She likes living alone. This is what she wants." The lie was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that it took my breath away. In front of my grandsons, he was rewriting history, making me the one who chose this separation. Tommy looked at me with questions in his eyes that I couldn't answer without undermining his father. So I smiled and nodded and pretended that yes, this was what I wanted. As the truck pulled away, Michael came back inside one last time. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, might acknowledge what we were both losing. Instead, he handed me an envelope. "That's 2 months' rent money for letting us stay here. I know it's not much, but it's what I can afford right now." Rent money. For the son I'd raised, fed, clothed, and sheltered for 18 years, then sheltered again when his world fell apart. "Michael, don't make this harder than it has to be, Mom. This is better for everyone. Better for everyone, or better for you." He looked at me then with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, dismissive, final. "You know what your problem is, Mom? You can't let go. You want everything to stay exactly the same as when I was 12 years old. But I'm not 12 anymore, and I don't need you to take care of me. What I needed was support, and you chose your house over your family. I chose security over enabling your bad decisions." "My bad decisions?" His voice rose. "My bad decision was thinking I could count on my mother when my life fell apart. You could count on me. You did count on me. I gave you a home, I fed your children, I loved you all unconditionally. The only thing I wouldn't do is risk everything I've worked for to fund your reconciliation with a woman who abandoned you once already. She didn't abandon me. She left because our marriage was in trouble. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she left when things got hard, and now she wants back in when you've got things figured out. Just like you're leaving now because I won't give you what you want." Michael's face went white with anger. "You know what, Mom? You're right about one thing. I am leaving. And you know why? Because living here has become suffocating. Every day, it's like you're trying to keep me trapped in the past, trying to make me feel guilty for wanting my own life. You're just extra weight. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. What did you say? You heard me. You're extra weight. I'm trying to move forward, to build something new, and you're like this anchor dragging me backward. Sarah was right. Living here was never going to work, because you can't accept that your son has grown up and moved on. Extra weight. I stood in the doorway of my own home and watched my son walk away from me, carrying those words like stones in my chest. Extra weight. After 43 years of loving him, sacrificing for him, being there for every scraped knee and broken heart and failed dream, I was extra weight. The house felt different after they left. Not empty. Empty would have been better. It felt violated, like burglars had been through every room, touching my things, moving my memories, changing the energy of spaces that had been mine for decades. I walked through each room, cataloging the damage. The living room with its sterile blinds and oversized television. The kitchen with appliances I didn't want, and cabinet doors that had been painted without my permission. The boys' rooms, which still smelled like little boy dreams and innocence. In Tommy's room, I found a drawing he'd made. A picture of our house with all of us standing in front of it, holding hands. My family, he'd written in careful second-grade letters. On the back, in different colored crayon, he'd added, I love Grandma Dorothy's house. I sat on his bed and cried for the first time since Michael had left. But tears, I've learned, have a way of washing more than just pain. They wash away illusions too. And as I sat in that empty room, I began to see clearly what had happened to my life. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being Dorothy Mae Henderson, a woman with her own needs and dreams and value, and become just Grandma, a supporting character in other people's stories. When had I agreed to that diminishment? When had I decided that my worth was measured only by what I could provide for others? Michael's words, extra weight, had been cruel, but they'd also been revealing. He'd shown me exactly how he saw me, not as a person with inherent value, but as a burden to be managed or discarded depending on his needs. Well, if I was extra weight, then maybe it was time to stop weighing anyone down. That evening, I called my sister Linda. How are you holding up, honey? I'm angry, I said, surprising myself with the honesty of it. Good. You should be angry. I keep thinking about all the things I gave up for that boy. The trips I didn't take because I was saving money for his college. The chances I didn't pursue because he needed stability. The relationships I didn't explore because I was focused on being the perfect single mother. Dorothy, I'm not done. I'm thinking about Jim Morrison. Linda was quiet for a moment. Jim Morrison had been a widower who'd asked me out several times when Michael was in high school. A kind man, a good man, who'd wanted to take me to dinner and movies and maybe eventually somewhere warmer for vacation. I'd turned him down every time because Michael had said it would be weird to have his mother dating. He moved to Arizona, you know, Linda said gently. About 10 years ago, after his retirement. I know. I could have been in Arizona right now, Linda. I could have been somewhere warm and beautiful, with a man who thought I was worth pursuing, instead of sitting in this house that doesn't even feel like mine anymore, mourning a relationship with a son who thinks I'm extra weight. It's not too late, Dorothy. You're 73, not 93. You've got years ahead of you. Do I? Because I feel like I gave all my good years to someone who couldn't even thank me properly before walking away. Then stop giving. Start taking. The idea was so foreign, so revolutionary, that it took my breath away. Start taking. When was the last time I'd taken anything for myself? I spent the next week moving through my house like a tourist, seeing it with new eyes. The wallpaper in the dining room that I'd always hated but never changed because Michael liked it. The furniture arrangement that accommodated his big screen TV instead of my reading chair. The photos on the mantel, mostly of Michael and the boys, with just one small picture of me tucked behind the others. When had I become a guest in my own life? On Thursday, I called a decorator. On Friday, I called a real estate agent. Not to sell, but to get a proper appraisal, to understand exactly what my home was worth. On Saturday, I called a lawyer. I want to update my will, I told her. Of course, Mrs. Henderson. What changes would you like to make? I looked out my kitchen window at the garden I'd tended for 40 years, at the bird feeder where cardinals came every morning, at the life I'd built with my own hands and heart. I want to leave everything to charity. All of it. Mrs. Henderson, are you sure? Don't you have family? I have a son who told me I was extra weight in his life. I have grandsons whose father will likely use my death as another opportunity to ask for money. I'd rather my life's work go to people who will value it. The lawyer, a woman about my age, nodded slowly. Which charities did you have in mind? The children's hospital where I worked for 30 years. The church where I've volunteered since Michael was small. Maybe a scholarship fund for single mothers trying to better their lives. That's very generous. It's very practical. Michael has made it clear that he doesn't need me. He just needs what I can provide. Well, after I'm gone, he won't be able to have either. I signed the papers that afternoon, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. The changes started small. I hired painters to cover the walls Michael had painted without asking. I replaced his cold blinds with the kind of curtains I'd always loved, soft and warm and welcoming. I moved furniture back to arrangements that made sense for my life, not his. I put my ceramic angels back on the mantel. I hung my own photos on the walls, pictures of me and Linda on our trip to Niagara Falls, me at my hospital retirement party, me with friends from church, evidence of a life that existed independent of my role as Michael's mother. Most importantly, I started saying yes to invitations I'd been declining for years. Coffee with neighbors, book club at the library, volunteer opportunities that sounded interesting. I started filling my calendar with choices I was making for myself. It was at book club that I met Margaret Chen, a retired teacher whose husband had died 5 years earlier. Margaret was planning a cross-country RV trip and looking for a companion. I know it sounds crazy, she said over coffee after our discussion of that month's novel. 2 old ladies in an RV, seeing America like a couple of hippies. But I figure if not now, when? If not now, when? That night, I looked up RV rentals online. I'd never driven anything bigger than my Honda Civic, but there were classes for that. I'd never been west of Chicago, but there were guidebooks for that too. Margaret, I called her the next morning, about that RV trip. Are you serious? Dead serious. Why? Because I think I'd like to see the Grand Canyon. We planned to leave in September, after the summer heat died down. 2 months to get our affairs in order, to plan our route, to prepare for what Margaret kept calling our great adventure. I didn't tell Michael about the trip. I didn't tell him about the will change either, or the way I'd reclaimed my house, or how much lighter I felt without the weight of his expectations pressing down on me. He called exactly once after moving out, about 3 weeks later. Mom, I wanted to let you know we're settled in the new place. Sarah's moved back in, and the boys are adjusting well. That's nice, Michael. The thing is, Mom, money's a little tight with the move and everything. I was wondering if you might be able to help us out with groceries this month, just until Sarah's first paycheck comes in. I looked around my living room, arranged the way I liked it, filled with things that made me happy. No, Michael, I can't help with groceries. Mom, it's just temporary. No, it's not temporary, and it's not just groceries. It's you seeing me as an ATM instead of a person. It's you thinking that family means I'm obligated to fund your choices while you treat me.